Alright, this video is to act as a review, hopefully for all of us, and how do you factor trinomials. Pretty much every equation that we have solved so far this year has been working with linear equations. So you guys have been setting up something like 2x plus 7 is equal to 90 degrees. You know, you're solving this, you're getting a linear equation. Now we're going to take a look at situations where we have something like 2x squared plus 7x is equal to 90. And here we can no longer, subtract 7, divide by 2 anymore. We have this x squared involved, we have an x, and so there's a little bit more that we have to go with. I'm not going to do the whole background to all of this because that was an Algebra 1 thing. What I am going to take a minute to do here is just review how do you simplify by multiplying, as well as then how do you factor. And then tomorrow we'll be talking about how you're actually going to be solving with factoring. So going back to being able to multiply polynomials together. If you remember back in Algebra 1, you probably talked about a 4-letter word of F-O-I-L. And F stands for first, O stands for outside, I stands for inside, and L stands for last. And what you may remember to do is that you would multiply the first terms together. So x times x would give us x squared. Then I would take the outside terms and multiply them together. So x times -2, which gives me a -2x. And then I would take the inside terms and multiply those together. So 4 times x, which gives us 4x. And then we can also, L stands for last. We're going to multiply the last terms together. So 4 times -2, which gives us -8. If we combine like terms right here, we end up with x squared plus a 2x minus 8. And that's how we multiply polynomials together. Now, some of you are going to be able to multiply. I'm just going to go ahead and write this one here, x squared plus 2x minus 8. Some of you will be able to do some more of this in your heads. You might be able to write it out without using the wording there. So x times x, so that gives me x squared. I have x times 9, so that gives me plus 9x. I have 3 times x, which is add 3x to that. And then lastly, we have 3 times 9, which gives me 27. So combine like terms here again, and I get x squared plus 12x plus 27. Here, just making sure that you're very careful about if you have two negatives. First terms together, x times x is x squared. The outside terms together, so if I take x times a -5 is -5x. I take the inside terms, -4 times x is -4x. And then I take -4 times a -5, which gives us a positive 20. Negative times a negative gives us that positive. And we're left with x squared minus 9x plus 20. So multiplying polynomials here is the same thing as simplifying them. Another method that I like to sometimes do is I like to use the box method, and this I like to use especially because it sometimes helps people with the factoring. So 4x times x minus 2, which we just did, if you think of this kind of like finding the area of a problem. So what I'm just doing here is I'm taking x plus 4, putting that as one side of the box, and then x minus 2 is the other. And now I just go ahead and I look for what is x times x is x squared. For those of you that have done biology, this might kind of look like your Punnett squares. 4 times x is 4x. X times -2 is a -2x. -2 times 4 is a -8. When we combine like terms right here, we end up with an x squared plus a 2x minus 8. So I like using this method just because it makes for keeping everything very organized. I think people can definitely see what they're multiplying together, and at the same time, they're not making as many mistakes. They're not forgetting the O and the I of the FOIL part. So here, I'm going to combine my like terms again. So 9x plus a 3x So that gives me a positive 12x plus 27. And just being very careful when you have negatives, so x minus 4, x minus 5. And again, here you're less likely to make some of those mistakes. X times x is x squared. X times negative 4 is negative 4x. Or sorry, this is, I need to put a 5 in one of these spots here, so I'll put the 5 right here. X times negative 5 is negative 5x, and negative 5 and a negative 4 gives me a positive 20. And so now we have x squared minus a 9x plus 20. So two different options that you can have. Option number one is you can use the FOIL method. Option number two, you can use the box method to help you simplify. So now let's take this whole idea of the box method, and can we reverse this if I were to fill in the inside and have you guys fill in the outside? So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and pause the video, take a couple minutes here and try and see if you can figure out what goes on the outside of the boxes. All right, so we are going to call this, I'm going to go ahead for purposes here in a moment. I'm going to say this is box 1, this is 2, here's 3, here's 4, here's 5 and 6. We'll go 7, 8, 9, and 10. So see if you can go ahead and find the values for those 10 boxes. All right, hopefully you were able to find out what was going to be put in some of these boxes here. It's kind of a little guess and check version here. So up here, find box 1 and 2, I've got x times x, which gives me x squared. Well, to put what's going to go up in this box here, what times x is going to give me 3x. So that means in box number 1 here, I need to have a 3. When I go to the rest of this right here, I'm looking at some number times x is going to give me 4x. Well, the only number that would work right there is 4. And thankfully, between those two numbers, 4 times 3 gives us the 12 that we're looking at here. All right, so then I go over to the next one here. We have a little bit, few more boxes to solve for. I've got 5x squared. So really my options are 5x and a 1x that I could do there. And it looks like the next box right here, I have 15x. So if I think about 5x times 3, that right there would give me a 15x. And then 1x times something's going to give me a negative 2x. So let's see if I were to put a negative 2 here. That looks good. And now 3 times a negative 2 gives me the negative 6. So that works out really well. All right, taking a look at the next one here. I've got a couple different options this time. I have 6x squared that I'm looking at. So numbers that I can multiply there would be 1 and 6 or 2 and 3. So I got to kind of keep that in mind. Over here I've got a 2x, here I have a 21x, here I have a 7. Well, of these numbers right here, 7 and 2 are really the only prime numbers. And the only numbers that are going to multiply together to get 7 are 7 and 1. So if I were to go ahead and kind of think about that and have that help me here, because now if I take a look at, well, what times 1 would give me 2x? And so that right there would be a 2x. And then if I keep kind of thinking about here, 7x times what gives me 21x? Well, a 3x would work for there. And 3x times a 2x gives me 6x squared. So everything works out perfectly for that. Now, what I am doing here by having you guys work backwards is you are actually factoring. Okay, when you multiply, you are simplifying. When you take it apart, you are actually factoring this out. So when we take a look at multiplying here, and we simplify to these expressions down here, that's simplifying. When you break it up into numbers that are multiplied together, that is factoring. When we talk about factors of, say, 12, you know, 2 times 3 is a factor. 6 times 2, those are factors. It's numbers that are multiplied together. So in factoring, we are trying to break it apart, and really you're trying to undo the FOIL process. Now I'm going to take you back to this idea of the box method that I was using, because here again I think it helps us to, if you found some success in figuring out what goes on the outside of these boxes, then that makes factoring a lot easier for us. So here we have two boxes. If you notice from where we went from the multiplying to our final product, notice something that is consistent in all of these. Notice that the top left box is always the first terms. Okay, so when you were taking the F, when you're taking the first two terms and multiplying them together, that went in every one of the top left boxes. The other unique part about this is if you look at the number that's in the bottom right, in each of those right there, that is the last term of our polynomial, and that number came from multiplying the last numbers together. And then, last but not least, there is the other two terms right here that were added together to give us our middle term. And that's the number that's in the middle here. And that middle term is coming up because of the O and the I of our FOIL part. So I'm going to use this now as we start to look at how do you factor out a trinomial. There is a process, like an algorithm, that you can use. But for our purpose right here, I'm going to talk about the guess and check method, since typically that's a lot of the way that you are introduced to it when you guys are taking Algebra 1. Okay, so we have x squared plus 8x plus 15. Some of you are going to be able to do this in your heads, which is phenomenal. If not, I'm going to try and work with you, and hopefully by the end of these 2 days, maybe you can do some more of these in your head. So x squared plus 8x plus 15. What we're trying to do is think about what's being multiplied together to get there. With that box problem that we were thinking about, up in the upper left-hand corner is always going to go that first term. In the bottom right-hand corner is going to go that last term. The numbers that are in the diagonal boxes here are going to have to somehow add up to be our middle term. So here's where the game comes in. I have to ask ourselves, what times what is going to give us x squared? So x times x is going to give us x squared. Now I need to come up with two numbers that are going to multiply together to get 15. But more specifically too, I need these two numbers to also add up to 8x. So if I were to go ahead and I chose, say, 15 and 1 at this point, 15 times x gives me 15x. 1 times x gives me 1x. Those numbers right there do not add up to 8x. So we have to go back to the drawing board, get rid of that 1 and 15, and try something else. Say 3 and 5. 3 times x is 3x. X times 5 is 5x. Those numbers right there do add up to being 8x. So what ends up happening here is your factors are the numbers that are on the outside of your box. That is the parts that you're multiplying together, that you are foiling together to get your factors. So I get an x plus 5 and I get an x plus 3. Those are the factors. Okay, and here, just kind of when you're working with trinomials, kind of a rule of thumb, your first term right here, this is always going to go in the upper left-hand box here. This last term is going to go down here in the bottom right. And then the two values right here, they have to add together to give you the bx, the part that's in the middle. Okay, here's another one, x squared plus 12x plus 27. So in the upper left-hand box, I'm going to put the x squared. In the bottom right-hand box, I'm going to put the 27. So I ask myself, what times what gives me x squared? So x times x does. Now I need two numbers that are going to multiply together to be 27, but also I need to be conscious of what numbers are going to add together to give me 12x as well. So when I think of 27, I could do, let's see, 9 and 3. 9 times x is a 9x. X times 3 is a 3x. And good thing that 3x and a 9x do add up to be 12x. So now I take a look at what's on the outside here, and those are now our factors. So x plus 9 and x plus 3 are our factors. Okay, what if we have some negative numbers that are in here? So now I have an x squared, which is going to go in the upper left-hand box. I have a 21 that goes down here in the bottom right. All right, x times x gives me x squared. And now I have to come up with something that's going to give us the negative 22x. Well, let's just say I take oops, I don't want to put it right there. Let's say I go ahead and I take a 21 times a 1. 1 times x is 1x. 21 times x is a 21x. When I add those numbers together, I get a positive 22x. I need to make sure that I get a negative 22x. Well, if I make a quick little change and make this a negative 1 and a negative 21, this gives me a negative 1x. This is a negative, it's supposed to be a 21x. That right there adds up to be negative 22. So our factors are x minus 21 and x minus 1. So if I think about it here, x plus a negative 1, x plus a negative 21, which rather we're going to write that out as x minus 1 and x minus 21. Again, if you're able to do this without the box, that's perfect. For some of you, you're going to be able to do this in your heads. If not, you can always use the box to help you set it up. So for some special factoring relationship, actually I'm going to skip that for now. I can come back to that a little bit later. We're going to take a look at a different type of trinomial here, which has you working with a different type of problem. The only thing that's different is that your leading coefficient has a number out in front of it. So we're dealing with a 2x squared. We're still going to approach this guess and check way in the same fashion. Going in the upper left-hand corner is a 2x squared, and then the bottom right is going to be the value of 5. The big thing that you have to worry about here is that it's not just going to be x times x to give us 2x squared. You're going to have to think that there's some other number to go along with that. 2x times x is going to give us 2x squared. And then, as I'm starting to look at, maybe you're starting to find some shortcuts here, your shortcut kind of gets, doesn't work so much as well anymore. If you're thinking about numbers that multiply together to be 5 and add together here to be 7, because we're out of luck. Our 5 is a prime number. 1 and 5 will not add up to be 7. Well, that's okay because you've got this 2x that's here. So if I were to put, let's say, a 1 here and a 5 here, 5 times 1 gives us 5. 5 times x gives us a 5x. 2x times 1 gives us a 2x. Those right there added together give us a 7x. This 2x ends up kind of being magical to us because it ends up changing a little bit and helps us get up to that 7x. So now my factors are going to be 2x plus 5 and x plus 1. So the big thing here is knowing that you've got the ax squared, which is going to go in your upper left-hand corner. C is going to go down here in the bottom right. And still, again, these numbers here have to add up to be bx. The big thing here is that you're going to have some number times x and some number times x. It might be 1x and 3x. It might be 2x and 3x. It just depends on the situation. Here I've got a 6x squared plus 5x minus 6. Upper left-hand corner is 6x squared. Bottom right is going to be negative 6. Okay, so now I'm looking at numbers that are going to multiply together to be 6x squared. I can do a 2x and a 3x. I could also do 1x and a 6x. Okay, we've got different possibilities. Now I need to come up with numbers that are going to multiply together to be negative 6. So I've got 1 and 6, I've got 2 and 3, and I can use some different combinations of them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put a 3 here, and I'm going to put a negative 2 here. They have to multiply together to be negative 6, so one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. So if I multiply this out, 3 times 2 is 6x. 3x times negative 2 is a negative 6x. Now, if I were to add those together, I'm going to get 0x. So I need to go back, and this is why it's called the guess and check method. I made my guess, It didn't work, so now I got to try something else. All right, so I want to get -6 again, so I'm going to kind of think about a better option here. If I'm trying to get 6, let's go with 2 and 3. I think I'm going to go ahead and try and put a 2 here and a, actually that's not going to be, I think I'm going to have to put a 1 and a 6 here instead. Because what I'm trying to do here is I'm putting -3 here, but as I do this in my head, actually, I might be okay. Okay, hold on. Sorry, 2 times a 2x, so that gives me a positive 4x. 3x times a negative 3x is a negative 9x. All right, now I look at this, and I've got negative 9x and a positive 4x. I'm so close. I have a negative 5x and just not the positive. So if I flip these and make this a positive 3, and I make this the negative 2, now this is going to end up giving me the positive 5x that I'm looking for. So I'm going to end up with the factors of 3x minus 2 and 2x plus 3. Sometimes you will get it right away on the first try. Sometimes it takes you a little bit of time. The more you do them, the better that you get with it. Okay. I'm going to do one last one here. 9x squared minus a 12x plus 4. So we're going to take the 9x squared up at the top. I'm going to take a 4 and put that down here in the bottom. So 9x squared, we could go ahead and do a 3x and a 3x would work for that. 4, I could do 1 and 4. I could do 2 and 2. I've got to somehow get a negative 12x here in the middle. Now, right there, notice that I said that I had to get a negative 12x in the middle. And look at the positive 4 that I have here. So the only way I'm going to get that is if I take a negative times a negative. So I'm going to go ahead and take -2 and -2. -2 times 3 is a negative 6x. 3x times -2 is a negative 6x. And right there, I have a negative 12x. And so our factors end up being 3x minus 2 and a 3x minus 2. And so those actually end up being the same factors. Sometimes what you'll see that written out as is 3x minus 2 squared, since it's by itself. All right, so this video was to review factoring trinomials. These will be popping up as we move throughout the next term. So we'll continue with it, and we just need to start getting a little bit of practice.